Best Practices for Second Language Instructional Designers, a presentation by Teresa Kielhorn-Francois. As technologies have emerged over the last century, educators have attempted to harness them with the goal of improving student academic outcomes. Teachers in K-12 learning environments still struggle to harness this potential, and the same is true of second and foreign language instructors. This presentation aims to explain the latest and most effective approaches to second language education, to provide direction on effective instructional design methods based on these theories, to review the digital tools best suited to second language instruction, and to offer insight into the future of computer-assisted language learning in general. But first, here's a quick guide to some of the acronyms I'll be using throughout this presentation. The historically dominant model for language learning instruction has been the behaviorally based audio-lingual approach, which emphasizes the memorization and recall of vocabulary and grammatical structures, hence the rat in the Skinner box. This approach enables learners to recall words and utter stock phrases, but the successful application of that knowledge creatively in real-world situations often proves difficult. While it may have fallen out of fashion, it remains a practical approach for L2 educators. When preparing individual units, instructional designers must address requisite vocabulary and concepts before tasking students with extension activities. This may involve the rote memorization and explicit instruction of terms and language constructs using matching games or flashcards, for example. Instructors may also wish to delay higher order activities where necessary until basic vocabulary and concepts have been mastered by students in the target language. The goal of social constructivists is to facilitate learners in their attempts at organizing new knowledge into comprehensible schema or cognitive structures. The instructor's role in this approach is to scaffold the learning context in ways that prepare learners to undertake tasks that are challenging without becoming frustrated. Lev Vygotsky referred to this ideal learning environment as the zone of proximal development. For instructional designers, this means carefully considering learners' existing abilities when assigning tasks, guiding learners toward the knowledge they need to complete a task, and choosing tasks and activities that are meaningful and engaging to learners while still pushing them to greater language proficiency. Educators should also encourage learners to create new materials using the target language rather than simply consuming them. Derived from the work of Noam Chomsky, the communicative approach involves a great deal of social interaction and negotiation of meaning on the learner's behalf. The communicative approach posits that effective interaction and communication in the target language is the ultimate goal of language learning. This approach dispenses with explicit grammar instruction altogether, focusing instead on meeting learners' self-identified communication needs and objectives, such as shopping for groceries, for example. K-12 educators don't get the luxury of abandoning grammar exercises completely, as they're usually required by provincial curricula. Educators should nonetheless strive to meet their learners' communication needs. Instructional designers should write and clearly communicate actionable objectives to their students, enabling them to focus their efforts only on certain elements of grammatical accuracy while otherwise freeing them to work on meaningful communication. Many of the dominant theories of second language acquisition are those proposed by Stephen Krashen and various collaborators. In his natural approach, Krashen suggests that students learning a second language move through 5 predictable stages: pre-production, early production, speech emergence, intermediate fluency, and advanced fluency. Krashen's stages of language acquisition provide an excellent framework for sequencing course materials and activities on both micro and macro levels. Instructional designers should remember that learners may be relatively silent in the earliest stages of L2 instruction as they build the skills and the confidence necessary to begin attempting creative language production. Learners can only turn their attentions to successfully producing meaningful output once enough input has been absorbed and mastered. Educators should always choose learning materials that are comprehensible and accessible to learners in the target language. These ideas are more fully elaborated in Krashen's input hypothesis. His monitor theory discusses L2 learners' mental efforts as they negotiate learning and communication in a new language. A number of themes emerged during the review process. These topics can help guide instructional designers in their choices of L2 learning materials and activities. Learners should be presented with instructional materials and activities that are relevant and meaningful to them, ideally those relating to real-world problems and projects. Instructional designers should also include activities throughout a course that enhance L2 acquisition by activating learners' prior experiences and by building on their existing knowledge, a process called experiential learning. Although instructors may have to choose materials for students at times, particularly with novice learners or young children, learners should be empowered wherever possible to take ownership of their education by choosing topics and activities that are appealing to them and by independently seeking out information in the target language that meets their individual learning needs. Learning about the subtleties of a target language's cultural origins increases engagement with the materials and builds cross-cultural competency. Instructional designers who create opportunities for comparison and contrast between a target culture and the student's own culture helps them to more quickly construct schema for the new language. This approach requires a great deal of intercultural awareness on the part of the educator as well. Instructors shouldn't be the student's only source of second language communication. Peer discussion, evaluation, and remote connections to native language speakers are valuable sources of practice in the target language. Instructional designers must therefore integrate many avenues for interaction, both online and face-to-face, when building L2 curricula. Learning in a second language is mentally taxing. L2 instructional designers must always be cognizant of the extra effort required of students to work effectively in a second language. Educators can help mitigate cognitive load by reducing the lexical density of their texts and by uploading course materials so that learners may review them at their pace as many times as necessary to ensure comprehension. Learning outcomes in blended and hybrid environments have been shown to eclipse those of either face-to-face or strictly online modalities when teaching second languages. They meld the best aspects of face-to-face interaction with the enhanced access to resources and tools of digital technologies, resulting in greater student satisfaction. Unfortunately, many blended and hybrid instructional typologies assume a certain mastery of the target language, high technological proficiency, and self-discipline, rendering them unrealistic options for many novices and for younger students. These models also assume that students and their families have uninterrupted access to web-enabled devices and stable internet connections at home. Variations on the rotation model are best suited to most K-12 learning environments as they assume students' physical presence in the classroom on a daily basis. They allow instructors the flexibility of integrating online components according to the abilities and the interests of their students, and they can be adapted depending on the availability of needed equipment. The best digital technologies share many of the following features. They involve active use of the target language wherever possible. They favor peer collaboration and interaction. They involve content creation rather than consumption. They are accessible across a number of devices, and they allow the publication of student work for wider audiences. The following media and resources are recommended by SLA researchers for inclusion in L2 instructional design. They include video authoring, podcasting, concept mapping, digital presentations, wikis, weblogs, discussion forums, chat and instant messaging, virtual worlds, massively multiplayer online games, simulations, educational software and reference tools, and digital textbooks. Note that I've organized these tools from those requiring more creative input on the part of learners to those requiring less. Students who don't have access to a personal computer at home may still be accessing the web through mobile devices. As mobile devices supplant personal computers, some wonder whether the term computer-assisted language learning may soon be obsolete. Instructional designers such as Dr. Power are increasingly integrating mobile-assisted language learning, or MAL, into their courses and have begun developing frameworks to guide this integration. Keeping abreast of new technological innovations and research into pedagogical best practices necessitates ongoing professional development strategies. It is incumbent upon instructional designers to seek out professional associations and learning networks and to create professional development communities within their own institutions whenever possible. Administrators can assist in this process by freeing up time and financial resources for educators pursuing such opportunities. While research into the benefits of SLA pedagogy and digital technology implementation are promising, it can be hard to tease apart confounding factors when measuring academic outcomes. More research is needed to determine the most effective approaches for selecting and sequencing content and activities in L2 instructional design, as well as for identifying digital tools that best improve student language proficiency. Thank you so much for watching. You can find all my references and a bibliography in my paper. I look forward to reading your comments in the discussion threads.